two more rules, revolutionary rules of the camp. One, nothing is episodic, and two, nothing is cultural. I am using cultural tonight to refer to apparent external pressures, something arising outside of a man and affecting him. But these two rules are in-laws, if not blood kin, and that is nothing is episodic and nothing is cultural. Some of you have been around long enough that years ago I used an apparently fairly simple explanation to try to get all of this going in the right direction. And it was examples wherein I would simply pick out what appeared to be an episode. A man goes into a 7-Eleven store in the morning on the way to work to get a cup of coffee, a pack of cigarettes, gum, and he ends up speaking angrily to the clerk. And in those erstwhile more simplistic days, when you were more simplistic, either that or you were more erzatzly complex, I would then point out or try to get you to see that which seemed fairly simple, except people cannot remember it because they're not bred to remember it. But to remember that the guy was not necessarily, by any means, arguing at the store clerk. My, no. Think of all the many things that could have happened to that poor man as he left the house. And then, when some of you would go, well, yeah, that's true. You know, it appeared to be psychological. It appeared to be that you can't trust the first impressions of one thing causing another. But then before I would leave it even back then I would point out, well, you see how hard it is to remember such as that? And some of you would go, yeah, sure do. Then I'd say, well, how about this? Not only can you not remember that, you're not bred to remember it. It's not cultural effects, but you're not bred to remember such as that. You're certainly not bred to carry it back any further about, well, wait a minute. The guy standing here arguing with the clerk had an argument earlier with his wife as he was leaving the house, right? Which you thought showed a clear, linear progression of one thing caused another and caused another, and people just pick out one thing and say, like, the guy shouldn't have spoken so harshly to the store clerk because he's really still arguing with his wife. And then I would try to hint, well, wait a minute, what caused him to argue with his wife? And all of your nervous systems back then said, in essence, in a nice, polite way to me, but you said things like, hey, enough's enough. And we've already carried it further than most people will. I'm already not blaming the man for these harsh words he's speaking right now. We're going back that it happened a few hours earlier, seemed to have caused it. But my God, we've got to stop somewhere, right? Well, speak for your damn self. Now I want you to see, there is nothing episodic. And surely all of you now, you newer people, I'll just treat you as I should, in some respects, that some of this is just instantaneously obvious to you. Just at times it's when I warn you that don't let the simplicity throw you. But there is nothing episodic. But consciousness, because of the way it is, because of needs, looks at life as being a movie, as a two-reeler, a four-reeler. It looks at it as a TV show. It looks at it as a short story. It looks at it as a novel. It's got a beginning. It's got an end. It's got covers on the book. That is episodic. And it looks upon, if we certainly jump down, let's call you the person. And here it is, some kind of great metaphysical mumbo-jumbo that I come flying out of the clouds or my face is hovering up above you that only you can see in the 7-Eleven store. And now you are certainly turn to the guy and you say, give me a pack of long Marlboros. And the guy hands you a short one. You say, I said goddamn long. Are you deaf? Do you speak English? And suddenly, there's my spirit. And I go, if I was this kind of spirit, tut, tut, speaking to your fellow man in such a harsh way, shame, shame. And you went, yeah. And then I said, but what did I point out some time ago? This whole episode didn't start just then when he handed you a regulars instead of a king size. And you go, you're right. And I said, what's happened this morning? You said, well, me and the old lady got in an argument as I was leaving because you've been complaining about me working too much. And I don't know, I seemed upset. And I went, aha! Perhaps no excuse for being harsh, if not dialectic with your fellow man, but now you're expanding your consciousness enough that you realize that you weren't mad at him. And you'd think, yeah. And now I could say, finish the sentence. And you go, well, I'm still mad at my wife. And I go, now we're getting somewhere. Why did you get in an argument with your wife? Well, she didn't like me working so much. No. Do you see? Even if you try and take what might at first blush seem to be some sort of psychological scenario, it's not explanation. That all right, people don't really do what they're doing right then. That would seem to be just a small step, if not a tripping over from there to good Freudian psychology, good Western psychology, that all right, you may be arguing with a guy out in the 7-Eleven store, but there are unconscious motives involved, unconscious forces. Well, it was as simple as your wife arguing with you this morning, which seems pretty simple, or perhaps just when you pulled in the lot at the 7-Eleven store, a guy backed out without looking and almost hit your new car. That's understandable, right? And you weren't really thinking about the clerk. You just said, hand me a so-and-so. And the guy hands you the wrong thing. You went, hey, good grief. Aren't you listening to me? That might seem to be pretty simple. But also in the Western nervous system, and almost worldwide now, it's expanding, would also be, if it was the feeling, the belief that if it was not that immediate, then it has to do with simply that you're kind of a sorehead anyway, right? You go, well, yeah. And there's got to be a reason, right? Yeah. So lay down here, down on the counter, and tell me about your childhood. In other words, if it's not something that seemed to be an immediate cause this morning, then it's obviously what? It is a far-reaching, lingering cause of the way the traumas you've had as a child. The things that have happened in your life brought you to this position today. Right. Do you realize that as long as your life seems episodic, then inconclusive statements are the proper order of the day? So you thought that I'd already left that subject. Not hardly. When you're talking about consciousness dealing with its life in an episodic manner, have I made that clear enough? I keep using examples, and they're not too simplistic for me to say that consciousness, and as always, the heart of this, the meat of this, is not any sort of theory. You don't have to take my word for anything or to listen to my spellbinding speech. All you got to do is look at you. Look at consciousness. Just at any given moment, even right now, it seems episodic. The meeting started. We got the tape going. Had the Kyroots read. Then we turn the tape off. Then I stand up and I comment on the background. I ask if everything's ready. But life, to ordinary consciousness, is episodic. And for me to use movies or books is a prime example. And I just fear that some of you are missing it because it may seem to be so obvious, but it is much meatier and deeper. That you could find something on your own is why I don't really push it any further. I just throw out movies and books. But think about it. You go pay your money. You're prepared to have fun. Nothing wrong with you. And you sit down, and it flashes on the screen the name of the movie. That's I mean they're running the credits in the front or something. The name of the movie, and immediately, of course, some of them don't even run the name. If I want to make it any simpler, the projector comes on, and there is a guy standing, and he says, "Mabel, I told you I wasn't going to take this anymore." And you hear some breathing off the screen you can't see, and the guy pulls out a gun and shoots. And it starts, and you get intrigued. Let's say that you enjoy it. That's episodic. Nobody's life suddenly starts there. Nobody's life suddenly starts there. Now, if you want to play the material world, which you should be doing, this is what I mean by having a kind of ongoing attempted romance with the topography of life as to what in the world are you up to? Why is it that consciousness is such a way that everything is seen episodically? Not only that, but why it seems all right. But look at it very materialistically. For me to go back and play the part of some smart aleck thinker in the city, I could say, well, look, you're almost playing around with the idea of writing your autobiography because you could never do it. You could never stay up to date. Even if you got back and started far enough. That is, in other words, if we're going to have a movie, let's say the movie is on the life of Constantine. Harry Truman, anybody. You're going to have to say, all right, the movie's got to start somewhere. What do you want us to do? If we're going to do the life story of Satchel Paige, are we going back to the moment he was born? Well, wait a minute. Maybe we should go back to the moment his parents got down and started looking at each other like they might do it. Maybe the moment of conception. Where are you going to start? Right? Maybe you get somewhere with that. Right? Let's just start when he's actually born. Yeah, what happened the first few months? Can't we save some time? Nah. Right, so you do that. Right. But materially, what I'm saying is, you understand the film. You do understand. The film, Satchel Paige lived to be, whatever he was, 70 years old. You'd go and sit down at that theater and the film would start, and it would take 70 years to show the film, right? All right, let's say they cut out when he was sleeping. And otherwise, private moments has got no business being on the screen. All right, the point is if I was speaking for a city, Yellow Circuit, I could say, well, that's ridiculous because you cannot do that. But, all right, that would be, let's say, at least inconvenient to try and make a film like that, to try to see it. Same way with a book. If they're going to write a book on Harry Truman's life, how many pages? It's going to be take up a library to actually do his life. It's not just that. I was going back and show you that an ordinary Yellow Circuit, if I once pointed this out, I could say, well, it can't be otherwise. Just materially so. You could not do an actual movie of somebody's life. All right. But the question, if you can go back a couple of minutes, was, all right, that being true, and that Yellow Circuit could say, well, I understand that. You're right. It can't actually do somebody's life. It can't even actually tell a story. If we're going to do the story of Charles Whitman, or who it was, getting up in a tower and shooting those people in Texas, and it just suddenly it opens up and it's Charles, and it flashes the date on the screen, whatever it was, July the 12th, 1963, 9:20 a.m. And it shows Charles in bed and his mother saying, Charlie, you're going to be late for class. The thing is, why does it seem all right to consciousness? People don't sit in the theater and say, wait a minute, if I'm going to see this movie, I was interested in that, at least historically, don't just give me the day that this happened. And he's going to get up, and I don't see what you're about to do. You're going through the day and show him take his gun and shoot people, or whatever it is. Why didn't consciousness raise up and say, wait a minute, I want my money back? This film's not going to tell me enough. This film's not really going to do the story. It's not going to give the life of Harry Truman. The movie starts out, it's inauguration night, or it's a convention night, when the second term of Franklin Roosevelt. And it just starts there, or the first convention, and somebody's saying, we should consider that little guy from Missouri. What's that little fucker's name? Somebody says, Harry Truman. Why don't conscience say, wait a minute, don't start there. The man had a life. He was, fooling around with a Pendergrass machine. Something smells in his background. I want to know something about it. It seems all right. Do you follow me? Great books of literature, the great novels. You open it up, and it just starts somewhere. But consciousness jumps right in. Consciousness doesn't say, wait a minute, what happened before this? Of course, everything happened before this, and you can't put it in a book. Everything. I don't mean just everything happened to Harry Truman. Everything happened to everybody before it starts there. But the point is, when I went through all that, you simply got to see. This is no trick. It doesn't take any kind of effort to simply see, all right, now that you point out, I've always done it and it seemed fair to me. You should find that interesting. Simply on the basis, not much further to look. When I say you can find it interesting, if you've got real eyesight and you see how things overlap, I don't mean to keep looking for months and years for some deeper significance. There it is. Consciousness is constructed in such a way that it deals with life. And rather than just life, say I tried to give you some breathing room, a place to get started, the arts, movies, books, that it deals in episodics, and consciousness finds it to be proper, never questions it. And it's not cultural. You didn't learn to do this through culture, because there is no such thing as culture. As long as your consciousness accepts life just the way it is now, your consciousness sees everything. Never analyzed it in this way, but I've done it plain and crude enough for you by now. Showing, it is directly analogous with all forms of literature, drama, movies, TV, etc. But consciousness does it in the same way with life, that things are episodic. It doesn't call it that, but you need to see that that is the way consciousness works. There is no such thing, let me go back to the way I put the rule. Nothing is episodic. The guy arguing, or you arguing with a guy, speaking angrily, just for a few seconds to a man in a 7-Eleven store, the apparent anger, this apparent dance going on between you and this total stranger, so it's the first time you've been in there, this dance did not commence. There was not an episode that commenced when you walked in the door of that store, nor is it going to be conclusive when you walk out, no matter what's said. If the guy says, well, hey, don't holler at me, you say, well, hell, never mind. Whatever it is. If the guy says, well, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, and you go, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. It doesn't matter what happened. That apparent episode did not commence when you came in that store, nor is it conclusive, no matter what's said, when you leave. Whether the guy's waving and saying, come back, or whether the guy's saying, hey, don't ever come back, and you're saying the same to you. It did not commence there. It did not conclude there. But to consciousness, it is otherwise. It could, within the next 20 or 30 minutes, you'd be at the office and walk in looking kind of huffy, and somebody with the water cooler say, hey, what's wrong? You say, ah, hell, I don't know. I stopped in the market. You can't even get people. Who are they hiring nowadays? They're hiring people, they make sure they got an IQ at least to their shoe size. These damn people working in a place like that, and the guy says, oh, calm down. You go, yeah, you're right. It's like this was an episode. It's a whole piece of route. It was a little novelette. It was one scene out of a movie. That is your life. But it has its own apparent beginning, middle, and end. That it seems to be to you a conclusive statement. That's what an episode seems to be to consciousness. That you can't open a book, you can't go to a movie, and it just suddenly, just for no particular reason, looked at from one way, this movie just starts in the middle of somebody's life. And then finally it gets to the point that's been about an hour and a half, and they spend enough money. Suddenly the movie is over. And people go, oh, well, I'm glad it worked out. Me too. The music comes up, and the final credits roll. The lights come on, and you go, ah. It was episodic. Although it was minor or lesser episodes in the movie, the experience of the movie, the experience of reading a book, a Balzac, all the way that to a true romance little novel. Whatever it is, it was episodic. It was a story that just, in a sense, arbitrarily started somewhere in life. Apparently, of course, in somebody's life. And then it just arbitrarily finally ends. If there was any useful information, if there was any telling, worthwhile, complex information therein, then such as this would have no life. If life could speak to you on the basis of episodic consciousness, then all this would be a waste of time. Anything, well, we just wouldn't be here, none of us. Besides it not being episodic, besides the first new rule I was pointing out of a revolutionist camp of nothing is episodic, nothing is cultural. But as long as consciousness sees things as being as episodic, it will perforce see them as being externally, the influence as being externally based. The causes of this episode, the motivations of the episode are cultural, that is, as opposed to genetic. That the guy, all right, did speak to this store clerk in an angry manner, but you're right, nothing is that simple. He was already upset. He was already feeling pressure. A car almost hit his new car. He had an argument with his wife. Today, he's already had inside information, or at least the brutes are floating around the office, that there's going to be a takeover from another company, and there's going to be a large number of middle management people get the pink slip, and today's Friday, and if it's going to happen, it's today. So, there could be some basis out of that range of this particular gentleman speaking in an angry, an untoward, an undeserved, hostile manner toward this helpless store clerk. But it's not his fault. Well, generally speaking, if we're going to be civilized, it's not his fault. Think of the pressure on this guy. Arguing with his wife, he may get fired today. Let me put them all together. And somebody almost hit his new car. And so then it's understandable. We shouldn't do it, but it's understandable. Those kind of external cultural pressures that he could suddenly, to a guy when they hand the wrong thing that he asked for, and him go, "I told you so and so." It's understandable. Well, it is, except if you're going to be try and hang around the camp, never become part of whatever the hell this is. It is simply a rule. You can't just say, "Well, that's understandable. All this almost makes sense, but it's pretty minor." Nothing is episodic and nothing is cultural. And as long as you go along with both of those kinds of views, that kind of very limited, stereoscopic view of life, you can't move. You're not really inside the revolutionary camp, because then everything has the appearance of a conclusive statement. But it's conclusive only on the basis of episodic view. Throughout, it's true in this context. It's true you just read this book, whatever it is, a novel. Some young girl that grew up in an orphanage and always dreamed of finding Prince Charming, and everybody tried to, I don't read those novels, but if it was times past, all these evil men tried to get her in bed, and she resisted. And then her Prince Charming finally came along and said, "How many dozen guys you slept with?" And she said, "None." And so he said, "Well, let me marry you, and we'll got all the money in the world." This was been true back in the 50s, I guess. And then she says, "Boy, I'm glad I did the right thing." The end. All right. There would be a conclusive statement in there, sometimes known as a moral. There'd be something to learn, but there was a conclusive statement. We could make, I'm of course doing it very simplistically, but on the basis of what little I told there, that virtue will out. It pays to be virtuous. Whatever it is a conclusive statement that the person started somewhere on page 1, their life went along, and then it got to a satisfying to the reader conclusion. The end. Page whatever, but it says the end quite clearly. And you close the book, and on the basis of that being episodic, consciousness takes that as being a conclusive statement. And of course, it is not. Or if you want to try it the other way again, if it is, then what the hell are you doing here? If it is, why doesn't everybody understand everything? If it is, at least why doesn't everybody understand or even suspect what's really going on? See if you can jump a little sideways. That all sciences, all disciplines, all even attempted disciplines, economics, sociology, all the way to that, to the hard physical sciences, they're all attempts to construct a conclusive statement. And they oftentimes, in the world of episodic reality, they appear to. Now they seem to change over periods of time, but that's looked at as being progress. Looked at as a continuing unfolding, more statistical information in the soft sciences or disciplines. The hard sciences, nowadays, better technology. We can now see a little bit further down the tunnel. We can now theorize. We can construct mathematical formulas that were not possible 3 months ago, before this new mainframe. In the soft sciences, it seems to be, we have more statistical information. But they are all a single attempt. It's an attempt to construct, and they're driven to do it. Nobody decided to. They're driven to try and construct a conclusive statement. What goes up must come down. Now, of course, a lot of people, if we were to go back and play with history, and I could bring us all, we could float over. I can't remember whether Newton's really given credit for actually saying that, but let's just pick him out. We could float back a couple hundred years and look down. There's all kinds of people that, whoever it was that first said, what goes up must come down. There's all kinds of people standing around and went, yeah. You know, like, are you waiting for a hand? I never put in words, but yeah. But the feeling of whoever said that first, and maybe some of the first ones that heard it, he said, I got something to tell you, and he tells the guy, it has a good feel to it. But I'll tell you why. Because it seems very close in the episodic world of the city, as being a conclusive statement. What goes up must come down. There it is. Try it. Everybody knew it. And it just, you want to say, well, by God, that about wraps it up. I feel so good about that. And then there is also this feeling, the more you get into complex areas of life's body where the nervous system is really pushing up into the higher circuits, there continues to be this feeling that in some way these sorts of physical, obvious, conclusive statements must have some possible pertinence in other areas. Or even an unsaid feeling that, all right, if we can conclude one thing for sure, then by God, we're getting on the high road. This whole thing will unravel for us. This whole puzzle can be solved if we once get one thing that we know for sure. And of course, nowadays, what goes up must come down. You know, that's no longer true. I mean, if you're just sophisticated enough to read, I think they call it a science page, in the Atlanta papers once a year. If you do that, you do know by now that what goes up does not come down necessarily, because what they used to call up and down is no longer of any great consequence if you're really talking about the hard science of physics. All the way, last time I started out, what little I've mentioned in passing was religions I was pointing out, and all sorts of social theories, political theories, are all attempts to construct a conclusive sentence, which ends up being a kind, and we'll try to get you to help tie some of this together tonight if we got enough tape. It's very close to the search for a constitution of a conclusive statement between something and something else. Trust me. Not literally, just hang on for a few minutes. You don't have to trust me. That's only pertinent to some of you who don't know me. For you new people out there, that was just a joke again. The conclusive statement. There is a built-in desire. There is a kind of continual, low-level, non-verbal, heretofore unanalyzed, unspoken of, longing, search for a conclusive statement. Religion in the real social, in the widest possible sense, to most people, we're right at the cusp of things changing, but don't take that serious, because if we were standing here, and this was in 1227, we're all huddled around a real campfire, sucking on bark, and I was talking to you, and I'd been saying the same thing, that we're right on the cutting edge of things changing, so don't get all excited. But as far as the kind of effect that what's been called religion, had on the nervous system, I'm saying it's just in a period of flux, but up until now, or your parents' generation, at least in this part of the world, religion could be seen as being the ultimate attempt, reflecting the ultimate attempt to feed this need, to feed this longing for a conclusive statement. But you can see it in things, when I was bringing up tonight, that would seem to be about as far removed from religion as possible, and I'm saying that is even the hard sciences. And forget, in the city of talking about intellectual curiosity, that's true, except it's just 2/3 of reality. It's just flawed, it's lacking. I'm telling you, it is through man life attempting to produce a conclusive statement. And in that sense, religion and science are the same thing. Political theories and sports. I hit sports every now and then, but some of you should see one of the ways I can describe the appeal of sports, and you don't even have to be that natively physical yourself, is that every day, every time a game is played, it has a kind of feel among all the things on the news, all the things in the newspaper, of a conclusive statement. They're still fighting in Beirut. Give me a break. The Irish are still fighting the British over what? Potato heads. But you can turn over there and see, it seems so satisfying. Like a good Moreau painting, if you like him. But it seems to be all wrapped up that the Mets and the Angels are in the same league. The Mets beat the Angels 5-3 in 10 innings. Case open, case closed. That's it. There's nothing you can do about it. You can sit there and think, God, where's this going? It ain't going nowhere. The game's over. You can think. Of course, you can say, well, now what does this portend for the rest of this season for the Angels and all that? I'm telling you, I know that women, I've heard women ponder this, and I've heard other men ponder, like, why in the world would somebody say, wait a minute, in a bar, they'll say, wait a minute, they're going to give the scores of the NBA. Shh, would you turn the set up? And all it is, the guy sitting there, a talking head, and he says, all right, the scores are, and he goes, blah, 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 blah. And you'll see people going, yeah. And it gets through, and you turn to the guy, you have take a sip of beer, and you say, I know what you found it interesting. Oh, yeah, I like to keep up with the NBA. What was the score between the Pistons and the Lakers? He doesn't know. He might know one or two teams, his home team, and whatever, if he had some money bet. But he would sit there and listen to the whole thing. Blah, 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 and he'd go, no. And so, but it's almost a feeling that at least somewhere in life there is episodes that have a beginning and a satisfactory conclusion. When I say satisfactory, his team may have lost, but it is conclusive. That game's over. He dropped $10, but he can sit there the rest of the night and go, wait a minute, I bet they got cheated. He can sit there all night. You got to be an idiot. The game's over. They're already on a plane going somewhere else. There's nowhere to appeal to. It's just one game out of 200 or whatever they play. But it seems to have had a satisfactory conclusion. I'm just going to point out that that is a part of the intrigue of spectator sports. It is part of the intrigue of spectator sports. I might also add that there is nothing comparable in the arts. Painters don't play each other. Composers don't play each other. But the closer you got is you can pick up if you heard that they discovered Hindermuth chamber work that they just discovered it and it was being performed last night for the first time. You actually get the New York Times and some critic pans it, but the critic wasn't playing Hindermuth. That is, they weren't in a wrestling match. And so there's really no conclusion. Sports seems to have this every day. Elections in countries that have vote. People that have no real interest in politics. You can see them sitting in bars. And they'll begin to run the election results, and some people say, shh, I want to hear this. And they just got a vague recollection. They mentioned two guys, and the person might remember, oh, I remember that was the guy that they caught in bed with a Girl Scout troop. And so they got no interest. The guy doesn't vote, but it's like, all right, let's see what happened. And the guy got trounced, 2-1. And he's not that interested. He's not that interested, but it apparently was a conclusive statement for the day. Ha! The guy lost. Good enough. Now let me point out another little something that appears to be on the other side of the street. Through man, life is arranged going in the other apparent 3D direction. Through man to resist some things. Now you gotta listen quick because, well, you just gotta listen quick because nobody's ever heard this on the planet. Things that just seem to be obvious, that your nervous system thinks to be obvious, and they're not. Life through man puts up a certain resistance to things that have been going on throughout the history of man. And they seem to have, according to those that life makes resist it, that part of its body that resists it, they have, to begin with, great moral justification for what they do. No. I got something better than moral justifications. Cellular conditions, molecular necessities, such things as homicide, capital punishment, abortion. That there are groups throughout history that put up a apparent very passionate argument with moral justifications appealing to higher forces. But let me tell you what the basis of it is. That all of those three that I named are way too close to a conclusive statement. There has been running battles course, homicide is one person killing another. The death penalty is the state, in the name of the people, killing a person. But throughout history, go all the way back to the Greeks, and there have been, in every society that had some form of the death punishment, the Old Testament supported it, there was always a group. There's always. You should know this by now. You're not surprised. If something has a life of its own in the history of life, that is the continuing, unseen body of life itself, then there has been resistance to it all the way through. It has been a duo. Just sometimes the history of it doesn't show. It seems to disappear for a while, and then history will note, well, it came back again. This group suddenly showed up, and it spread all over northern Europe. It spread to the eastern part of the Mediterranean. For some period of time, many people saying the state has no business killing people, blah, 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 blah. What it is, in this case, somebody kills another person, and it's in a state, in a part of life's body, that does not have the death punishment. You realize it's like a game that doesn't end. The family of the person that was murdered, they're convinced this guy should have hung. But 10 years ago, we stopped the state executing people. So it's an inconclusive statement. It drags on and on. People debate it. But if they find him guilty, and they say, shoot him tomorrow, they shoot the fucker, and that's about it. The family of the murdered can go, well, let's get back on with our lives. The family of the guy that was executed can go, well, geez. You know, we always knew he'd come to a bad end, but it's over and done with. What can we do? Rest in peace. You move on. It is way too close to being a conclusive statement. But see, you think, the nervous system is wired up to think, go back to the more personal level of homicide. Well, wait a minute, something's holy about human life, right? And the God said don't kill each other, right? Well, all over the world, there's just every society that ever aspires to be civilized at all. In some way they say, all right, you people don't murder each other. Yeah, I know all that. And don't tell me that God said not to, and don't tell me, well, it's the only civilized way. People got no business killing one another. You don't know where any of that came from. You just opened your mouth and you said it. I'm telling you why. Forget all the gods, forget morality, forget that human life is sacred. It's as sacred as a gazelle. But gazelles get murdered every day. We just don't call it homicide. Fish get murdered by people. Fish get murdered by the fish. Everybody gets homicided. So forget all this morality. You know why the parts of life doesn't like it? Because when you kill somebody, that is very close. Just on a small level, I'll grant you that. But there on one level is something dangerously resembling a conclusive statement. Turn the tape over. To say the very least, there are a string of examples that I could mention, and I'm not going to mention another damn one, of things. Now, but you newest and flabbiest-minded people should at least have the suspicion by now that I don't talk about morality because there is no such thing. I'm not talking about the sanctity of human life, and it's just all irrelevant. I'm not attacking it, I'm not poo-pooing, and I'm not supporting it. It's just nothing. If that's your interest, you belong back in the city. Here, all it is a springboard for something else. Here, all it is like you're trying to take a step on a ladder, and it's like 2/3 of a wrong going out there. And the reason you can't get anywhere is your foot keeps going where the hole is. That's all such as that is. But there is a reality that makes people, all over the world, whether you grew up supposedly in the culture of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, atheism, human secularism, there is something in almost all human nervous systems that feels when they hear we shouldn't kill each other. People should not kill each other. Almost every nervous system on this planet goes, yeah. That you cannot stand up and say, wait a minute, that's wrong. We should kill each other, or at least some of us should. But nobody in the city, they're not supposed to, it's of no consequence. Nobody can see, nobody needs to see, nobody can feel it, that there is a quiet, real physical, material basis, that is, as opposed to apparently individual directives from God or some kind of inborn morality in all of us. The thing is, life cannot abide widespread, conclusive statements in the same way that you can internally. You cannot. It'd kill you. Well, first off, it'd immobilize you. You'd have all the makings of a hermit. I'm talking about a real hermit, not the kind that joins the International Hermit Society. Now, I'm talking about a real hermit. You'd almost be immobilized. Life would be immobilized. Once you're immobilized, as you're still, there's nothing to be learned from you. Life got no more need for you. You'd have no need for yourself, and you're only a few breaths away, a weekend away from death. Homicide, murders, forget religion, forget all that. Not because I say so, but if you belong in this, as soon as I bring up such as this, it should strike you, without me having to even do a pseudo-sermon, it should strike you when I start talking around the edges of such as this, that yeah, something is weird. That it does feel right to me that we shouldn't kill each other. And you can't imagine you killing anybody, and I don't want to imagine you killing anybody. But it should also strike you as funny that the whole thing about God speaking to somebody, to Moses or to Odell or to Bubba, and saying, go and tell the people don't kill each other. That sounds nice, but Jesus, you're supposed to be past the fairy tale stage. What is going on? To what end does life have it built into people that we shouldn't be murdering each other? Well, the obvious, you might say, well, if we all murdered each other, we might wipe out the human race. It'd be dangerous. Well, all you're getting at now is you're worried about your own ass again, you're thinking about death. If we can't have murder going on all the time, because if it's just widespread and rampant, I might step in the way. I might be next. So don't get involved with what seems to be your nervous system's personal desire to live forever, in the way it can comprehend, that is. But it's on the basis that life cannot abide widespread, conclusive statements. And death, murder between one man and another, not just so-called natural death, but if people started killing one another on a large level, and it seemed to be unchecked, they began to grow, at least mathematically, it just went unchecked, you would have a continuing, dangerous amount of conclusive statements. Because in a sense, no individual is of any particular value. Don't give anybody the blues. But whoever it is, when you killed him at the city level, that's a pretty conclusive statement. Because regardless of what you may have believed or read in weird books, nobody, at least they don't have them on film, and even I know better, but they don't have anybody on film that's ever been shot 17 times and stabbed and pronounced dead by 3 doctors or medical examiners who got up an hour later, a week later, who got up and said, well, I'm okay. When they lay down and die at the city level, they stay died. They do not get up. So at that level, you have what is a conclusive statement. And that person, whatever energies they were doing, the people they argued with, the people they apparently loved, the people that they apparently loved and argued with, all of the energy they were transferring, that part of life is gone. Of course, that one person, and you and me, we're going to go someday, one way or the other. But I am telling you, the whole thing of murder, that to the death penalty, where the state has the right to do it, all the way to abortion, which seems to be a very touchy subject, right here in our day and time again. And it seems to have all kinds of moral significance. We're still talking about, from one view, homicide. From some part of life has people saying it's homicide, and part say it's not. And they argue, and they will bring out medical statistics. They want to bring out new medical theories. Is a fetus actually alive? Is it not alive? Well, one religion said you couldn't do it anyway. Well, hey, I got a brand new religion that says it doesn't matter. Forget all that. What you're dealing with is it's too close to a conclusive statement. You can't back up. As a real aside, since I didn't speak much about that, the death penalty, that is one of the apparent city arguments for the opponents to the death penalty. It is an irreversible act. And what if we put this guy to death? We electrocute him, we shoot him, we hang him, we run over him with a truck, and we find out later, new evidence arises that he was innocent. Oh, we shouldn't do that, because then it's too late. They don't know it, but they're real close to the truth. It doesn't matter about that guy. Not even more than it matters about you or me on a wide level. But on another level, it's got nothing to do with morality. You are dangerously close, if that went unchecked, to a conclusive statement. Because that one guy's, whatever function he was fulfilling, or woman, of transferring energy and all the stuff about him, it's over. That's it. Feed his body to the fishes. That man is not going to do anything else at the city level. Dangerously close, I'm being poetic, you understand, dangerously close to a conclusive statement, which is not the order of the day for life. Well, let's see, we've already turned the tape over, so that means I've been talking how long? 45 minutes? So, the best I can figure, I am now already something like 39 minutes behind where I should be. So here we go. Here we really go. See if I can hit at least two more places and see if you can see that there is absolutely no connection between these two. So that I am talking, well, what I'm doing, I'll go ahead and clue you in. What I'm trying to do, I wasn't going to tell you, but I'll go ahead and tell you. What I'm doing is giving a living example of episodic reality. Because I'm talking about tonight are little packets that have nothing to do with each other. I always get a tick when I lie. How about another? I might as well go ahead and call it a rule because it really is. Another separate rule, number 3 for the night, that would be a revolutionist really camp rule. And that is, if you can simply do it, you don't have to talk about it. As always, believe it or not, I choose my words very carefully. If you can simply do it, you don't have to talk about it. It is probably easiest for me to jump across the street and start from the other direction. Good examples. Smokers who can't simply quit must do what? Discuss it until you're sick of it. Drinkers, people with a bad temper, people who say their nervous system makes them believe, as everybody else, that there is some episode in their life that should be changed radically. Of course, change radically is just basic change in the city. That is, whatever it is I'm doing, I'll stop it. Whatever it is I'm not doing, I'll start tomorrow. No, I'll start now. All right, tomorrow. Well, later tonight. As long as you cannot... Go ahead, I don't want to overdo it, but quotation marks. As long as you can't simply do it, you're doomed to talk about it forever. But conversely, back to how I stated the initial rule, if you can simply do it, you don't have to talk about it anymore. Can anybody see the inconclusive factor again? Do you see it's tied? One does not cause the other. We're at another great juncture point. We're back in the hands of the redoubtable city 3D consciousness that there is no way for me to verbally put this together, because as soon as I say it, ordinary consciousness has to look either here or there, and it seems like, all right, one calls the other. But I can see that, all right, you could reverse it. One didn't cause the other. In a sense, they're not even connected. And in a sense, they're the same thing. That is the order of the day in the city of being inconclusive statements of reality. The connection I'm trying to hint and push you toward, I'm right here at it now. And people who can't simply do something, who must continually talk about it, those two things is what several minutes ago, or a minute ago, I was saying. At first, if you listen with one ear and one eye, you think, oh, I see, all right, one causes the other. If you're describing it correctly and I hear you, then life's need through man to have inconclusive statements is why people, it sounds obvious, that's why they continue to talk about, boy, I'm going to quit smoking. Boy, I'm going to quit smoking any day now. I see one causes the other. No. But you could say, all right, now I see, all right, people who continue to talk about so-and-so, that's what makes life seem to be full of inconclusive statements, because you're surrounded by people saying, well, tomorrow I'm going to lose weight, tomorrow I'm going to lose weight. And I've been living next to this guy, I've been living with this woman for 10 years, and once a week she says that. And so that's what causes the appearance in life, as you call it, of inconclusive statements. No. One doesn't cause the other, even vice versa. And as I said, they almost are the same thing, except that's not true. And some of you might be good enough to say, I see, they're the same thing. That's closer, but that's not true. Well, other than the fact that everything's fungible, but you got to be good to know that, and it doesn't matter. One doesn't cause the other. They're not the same thing. They're not even connected in a way, but in another way, it is throwing the rock through Einstein's great curved universe and waiting long enough, and it hits you in the back of the head while you're waiting for it. Except in the real universe, you would throw it out there, and suddenly you get hit back here and from both sides. The one rock would have become three. I'm just going to have to tonight tell you or ask you, can you see when I state, and most of you hear the reality of this, even if you can't go any further right now, that if you can simply do something, then you're not forced to talk about it, to say the very least. If you can simply do something, and many of you have had this experience already. We won't go into the length of time that you may have been able to persevere in this quest, but if you can simply, right now, tomorrow, some habit that you want to change, or some decision that I keep talking about, I'm going to take up running. I'm going to start running. And you've been talking about it. You're driving your husband or your wife crazy, your friends around the office. You keep looking in the paper and you want to discuss the best running shoes. You even subscribe to some magazine, Runner's World. You take it to the office and you discuss it with people who do run. And people every now and then ask you, when do you run? Maybe we'll run together. And you've been doing this for 2 years and you hadn't taken up running. And you talk about it, it is an inconclusive statement in you. In the city, it doesn't matter. But here, you people do know, there's enough of you that know this, if tomorrow you could suddenly get up, now running's of no more importance than anything else. If you could get up tomorrow, put on your little shoes, just get up. Let's assume you live with somebody, a house full of somebody, but at least somebody, you can get up, and you don't even have to really push it. There's just no need to awaken the person and say, hey, or to casually knock something off so if they wake up and see that it's 6 o'clock. Honey, what are you doing up? And now you are putting on your little new shoes to where they go, you're going to go run finally. Well, I didn't want to tell you. Enough of you know this. If you can, quote, simply do something, you do it and you're not driven to talk about it. Literally. If you're going to do it, if you can simply do it, you do it. And that's it. There is no need to talk about it. Do you see the inconclusive factor back at work? Since the contrary is true, since in the city that is not the norm. In the city people do not simply do it, whatever it is. You know that, or you don't know anything. You can talk about it, and in the city, back at your own original level of consciousness, people, they almost take it synonymously as, well, I'm thinking about it, which is, in the city, oftentimes the same thing as doing it. I'm working my way up. I'm thinking about it. I'm getting enough information. I don't go out and start running and hurt myself. I've been reading all about shin splints and turning your ankle and pulling your... You got to watch this. I'm getting up every morning now. I do some leg raises and I do a little stretching I saw some people do, and I got to find the right shoe. That is the nature of city life. It is inconclusive, and that is not merely some pejorative term. What it means is that these little tributaries are running through you of energy that apparently are some interest. They do not have an immediate beginning nor an end. They're not truly episodic in the sense that you and the store clerk had an argument and it began when you walked in and it ended when you left. Wherever it came, you can't remember. The thing I should get exercise. Well, I've been thinking about that for years, I guess, all the way from high school. You don't know exactly when, but you say, oh, high school, because I wasn't very athletic. No, I guess it was right when I got to college, and I began to worry about my health. I began to put on some weight. It seems to be a non-ending, is what I'm trying to get you to see, of an inconclusive statement, that there's not a finish to it. It is this continuing feel, to use my example, that I should be getting exercise. And then apparently it gets a little more refined. Running, that'd be the safest. The easiest, I can do it here and I don't have to buy any more equipment except those expensive shoes. But you never, perhaps the person takes up running. But in the city, you do know this, that is not really the end of the sentence. Because then they talk about it forever. Then they go to the office and they begin to tell people. They walk in with their tennis shoes on and their suit, and somebody says, what are you doing with your shoes? Tennis shoes. And they go, oh, I forgot. Oh. And somebody says, wait, have you actually started running after all this time? You go, well, yeah, don't tell everybody in the office I've been getting up at 6 and running. Then it becomes, he wants to run with other people. He wants to talk about it. He gets hurt. He hears about new shoes. You understand? It's simply a continuing hobby. It is a form of talking about it. It is an endless form of talking about it. Now, I picked out a fairly obvious material one of running, your life. That's what people talk about. Talk about their fucking life forever. You know, give me a break. I don't hear about it. Don't preach to me. Spare me the details. No, you don't know how interesting my life is. Where do you hear this? It's been years and years since I read my own book, but it's somewhere back in Magnus Machina. Remember about the guy that stumbled into this dark house, and the voice, and the stomping around. And the guy kept saying, wait a minute, trying to keep this thing, whatever it was, at arm's length, about let me tell you how I ended up here. And whether I could rewrite the story now, of course I could rewrite all my stories. At least the tacit, if not the overt, words of this breathing, stalking around thing in the dark was, spare me the details, Charlie. You're here. Yeah, but let me tell you how I got here. It's like, wait a minute, before whatever happens, let's talk about how I got here. The thing didn't care how you got here. You're simply here. Yeah, but wait, you're going to find this real interesting. I just know you will. And out in the dark, this thing, whatever it was, my intention was for you to be able to see in the dark, this thing's going, yeah. Yeah, I can hardly wait. You know, you're going to take my breath away. That is the nature of life. It's not some story I made up. It's not an attack on you. All you got to do is think back. Everything that's happened up until now, this second. What was your main hobby in life? Me. What's the main sound you've made all these years? I don't care if you play the trombone or whether you sing or whether you make rude noises involuntarily with your body. What's been the main sound you've made all your life? A whine. What's been your major complaint with your life? Me. What is your favorite subject? Me. Yeah, but I don't like me. Well, wait a minute. What's your favorite subject? Well, me, but I don't like me. That's a side, well, you ought to be set right quick. That's another form of the inconclusive statement. If you could simply do anything, if you could simply live, you wouldn't have to talk about it. Doesn't mean you'd be antisocial. It doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything I'd care to tell you in the city. But it obviously, or you would think that it doesn't mean that you're antisocial or you become a hermit. But you don't have to, if you can simply do anything, all the way from my hard material example, if you wanted to quit smoking, or if you wanted to quit drinking, and you were drinking, you know, every day of the week after work, if you could simply do it, there would be nothing to say, literally. This is not for me to try to win you over to some philosophy, for me to say that you should be the strong, silent type. I'm telling you naturally how it would be. I'm just telling you. As far as words will go, if there's anything you can simply do, you'll find out. You simply do it, and you're not driven to talk about it. I don't mean that you're trying to hide, waiting for somebody to say, I just realized you don't drink anymore. God! And not only am I impressed by that, I am doubly impressed because you hadn't even pointed it out. You waited for us to discover that a guy that was as big a sot almost as the rest of us, and you quit. God, that's impressive, and you didn't mention it. What a guy, what a guy. It ain't that. Because again, with you wouldn't be playing that if somebody tried it. Anyway, it's not the way it works. If you could simply do anything, you are not driven to talk about it. But conversely, as long as there's something that you cannot simply do, you're driven to talk about it infinitely, at least until the day you die. And now forget the drinking and the smoking, your fucking life. If there was some way that you could live, if there was some way that you could be you, and whatever it was that the be you seemed to be, all right, well, I'll do it. And so you do this one thing, and you see if that cures it. Like I've been coughing and spitting up blood every morning, so I'll quit smoking. You quit smoking, and you quit coughing and spitting up blood. All right, so far so good. Now back to something that seems a little less specific. Parts of you that wants to be something, all right, I'll be that. You know, I get this morning, I'll be that. If it doesn't work out, hell, go back to smoking. Go back to being you. If you could simply do it, you do it. If you can't do it, you talk about it. You are a part of life's continuing, inconclusive statement. Now the second area, I guess I'm going to run out of the tape here. Back to life's duos that I've hit once or twice in the last few weeks. Life has, as I pointed out in various ways, apparently everything is dichotomous. That there are these duos. All dances take two people, you got two eyes, stereoscopic vision shows, everything that seems to be of any unique human consequence is divided into twos, right and wrong, good and bad, love and hate. But now we've firmly established that, have we not? God, I hope so. And all of life's apparent duos is the thing that I brought up in the last few nights. I want to see if you can see any connection with it. It's both subtle and complex. But in all of life's duos, there is an interest, whether it be readily seen, whether it even seems to manifest itself in one person's lifetime. But in all the duos, there is an interest. It is built in. There's the interest in some kind of search to come up with what would apparently be a third area. The elusive, like my E-force. Now I point out that people don't see. It's not taken into account. The things seem to be run at the ordinary level, physically and theoretically. It seems to be run. It satisfies ordinary consciousness as far as ordinary consciousness can be inconclusively satisfied. That two things, good and evil, that's it. Right and wrong, that's it. True and false, if you're a little less religious. That covers it, and of course it doesn't. Or why are you here? And all the duos, though I'm telling you, I've been trying to work up for these last few nights, sneak it in, there is built into this arrangement, though, a very low level, and as I said, oftentimes it does not seem to manifest itself in your perception, but it's there. That this duo has a built-in search, a built-in interest to find, to construct, to produce what seems to be a third area cushion. It is like a third area buffer between the contours between the first two, between those that seem to be a very distinct contour, such as between true and false. In the city, you'd have to be ridiculous to talk about any other possibility. Things are either true or false. Or if you're still dealing with people who are tied up in the religious nervous system, you'd say, all right, you people believe in right and wrong. They say, yeah. And you say, wait a minute, there's a third area. And they say, ooh, well, you're done for. You're part of the bad part, because there's no third area. You're either on the good guy's side or the not. If you get into less religious areas and you try to talk to people and they say, all right, there's that which is true and that which is false. And they say, right. You say, there's a third area. You're nuts. You are not an intellectual. You belong to churches or somewhere, because things have to either be true or false. There is no third alternative. Built in, though, to the duo is this lingering, continual interest and a search, whether it manifests itself or not, I repeat, in your lifetime, to come up with what appears to be a third area that acts as a buffer between the two. It operates, and I'm going to say specifically, but I'm going to have to, of course, give you verbal descriptions of it, which are lacking, but I'm simply pointing you. It is a kind of cushion that's sought to help insulate of the duo at any given time, one from the other, And it's specifically for the benefit of that which would be. I'm going to have to describe to you. They were always talking about a dance. There's always the dominant and the submissive, the more powerful and the less powerful. It is always to insulate the more powerful from the less powerful, the more complex from the more simplistic, the higher from the lower, the younger from the older. And it's for the benefit of the higher, not the lower. Never. That'd be suicide. The examples, I've already covered them, but I didn't do them this way, such as a monarch, one man ruling many, one man and then everybody else, whether it be a benevolent monarch or a despotic tyrant. If that line, if that family, if that ruler is firmly entrenched, and he is a one-man seat of power, he will very shortly, apparently it's just life, come up with a court, and I mean a court in the real sense, not the physical court. He comes up with a form of his own regal bureaucracy. He comes up, it starts out that it's him and it's then the people. However he got there, he was born, let's do it the easy way, through heredity, he was born being prince of this group of people, this kingdom. Or if you see it easily the other way, some revolution, he comes in and he annihilates the previous rulers and he takes over completely. He had some followers, he had somebody to help. But then he takes over the power, and it's him and it's everybody else. In the word, it's the people, it's immediately obvious. No matter what he says, it's immediately obvious. If it's not, he'll bring up 2 or 3 people out of the crowd. You know, some of you people come up here and he'll kill them. And nobody raises a hand. Nobody. They don't even feel the inclination. They may be frightened, hope they're not next. But it just establishes, if your nervous system needed, if you're part of the crowd, now we got one guy in charge and he's answerable to nobody. Now we understand. It will not be long if that situation stays. A court will become established. He'll begin to grant out titles. He'll begin to create a bureaucracy. It becomes apparently a third estate. It becomes apparently a third area between the one man in charge and then everybody else who's not in charge. The one dominant figure and everybody else is submissive. The purpose of the bureaucracy, the purpose of the court, is so that when it becomes expedient, which it will to some degree, when it becomes expedient, the king will blame the people's woes on the bureaucracy, on the third area, on the court. Now, it can be, of course, varying degrees. I'm not going to stay out here in the apparent historical external examples that far because that's not our prime interest. But it can be that the time comes, instead of him just killing people, every time somebody raises an objection, he gets a little older, simply time moves on in one lifetime, and if he's got a bureaucracy, if he's got an apparent third area, and the people say, King, you know, we've worshipped you, we kiss your feet, and we blow kisses at you, and we send you our wives and children whenever you want them, but damn, 20 years you've been here, and we're still sucking on tar and chewing on bark, and him say, assume. They just reached the point, he's getting a little mellow, whatever description you need right quick. And he goes, really? I didn't know. Are things really that bad? They say, yeah, you didn't know? He say, heavens no. I told, hey, go get so-and-so, my prime minister of good food. And sure enough, there is one. And the king will say, I told you about 18 years ago that I wanted the people to start having some nice croissants and some fresh eggs every day to eat. And they just told me that they're still dealing with the damn bark and tar diet. And of course, things are arranged in such a way that the minister of good food, king never told him that, but the minister of good food, if he's about the court, he knows what's happened. He knows that he's about to go home to meet Jesus. He says, you have let me down. And he looked at the people like, I've been let down. The people go, oh, poor king. And there's them that's been sucking bark and chewing on tar for 20 years. And he says, what can you do when your underlings can't be trusted? And he'll turn around to the other people in the court like, well, you know, did I tell him to do that or not? And the king don't know how to put it that way. He just looks at them, and they all go, since they don't go home and meet Jesus today, they all go, bad minister, bad minister. You know, he had us fooled too. And they all look at the king like, God, we feel sorry for you. And the king looks at the people like, God, don't you feel sorry for me that he let me down? I tried to help you people. And they all go, oh. And they want to say, don't feel bad, king. It's not your fault. Two or three things. I'm going to try to push this a little bit further before the tape runs out. The duos are continually driven to, and sometimes they come out, and I was going to give you some real hard physical examples of good classic duos out there that do. Now it seems to be, I can say, they get together and after a certain length of time, like a monarch. If you look at a monarch and the people, and then that combination, a structure builds up, and it appears at times to produce a third entity, a third area that acts as a cushion. It's never been looked at this way, but that, and it's not that linear. It is not that you put those two together and they produce the other one. But I'm about to draw it out that way, especially on two-dimensional. When you see it on film and looking at it from out there, it looks two-dimensional. I was even going to draw an arrow, but it's not linear. You all should know that by now. How about labor and capital? That seems, there's a dichotomy that's warmed everybody's heart from Marx to Engels and Lenin all the way back to pre-industrial times. The feudal eras, when you had the bureaucracy of the nobility, the landlords and then the serfs. There's always been those that apparently had the capital, and for years and years and years and years, it was whoever owned the land. They were capital, and everybody else was labor. It is a dichotomy that the contours are so close, they're so immediate, and they are so rough, because when you've got a contour that's that close, they're constantly rubbing. And over a period of time, there seems to be this thing developed called unions. And in a sense, this is not sequential. But in a sense, this is a fair drawing that labor and capital put together, given enough time, produces an offspring, apparently, of a third type. In this case, unions. And a part of the great misdirection again is the unions seem to be, without any doubt, a man would have to be an idiot to say otherwise, they are to serve and for the benefit, and they're not. They're always for the benefit of the higher, the more powerful, the more complex, at the expense of it's to protect the higher. Law forms, I'd already used the monarch, but put together the state in the full sense of the word, and the citizens. That's been a historic dichotomy, a historic argument leading to bloodshed, wars, revolutions. They produce, let me put it simply, legal systems. It's really, if you can follow from what I was saying the other day, it's a form of constitutions. It appears to be predictable ways in which, I'm going to put it to you the nice way to start with, it seems to be predictable guidelines wherein the citizens expect to exercise some amount of freedom, some right, some protection against the weight of the state. And a couple of nights ago I put it to you a little more directly, if not crudely. It's the apparent expectations that the powerless have about the particular ways in which they're going to get kicked around by the powerful. But given enough time in any locale at any time between the state and then what seems to be the citizens or a citizen, it will produce some form of a constitution. Even if the state is a monarch, there's one guy. If he stays there long enough, not only the bureaucracy, there will get to be, if not written, and normally it gets written, but if not, through social custom, expectations of how, even this one guy with unlimited power, how he's going to treat everybody else. And to bring it more up to date, it turns into a kind of a form of jurisprudence of how the people expect to be treated. I guess maybe one more is enough, but here's one I bet you'd never expect. How about, back when the good old folks believed in such, between God and man? Now there's it. If you want to talk about the dichotomy of the powerful and the powerless, and they produce what? Religions. Which is, again, I will have to point out to you, is an extremely splendid example of bureaucracy. The eternal inconclusive statement, no one is to blame, but it produces apparently, I'm still talking about the nervous systems in times past and even those now, that fully believe, that they just fully feel that there is some external force, let's go ahead and call it God, and then there's man. Now talk about a gulf. You know, forget about a monarch and the serfs. Phew, that's bad enough. That they're almost in two different worlds, although they're in that same little area of England or Saxony. But the real dichotomy, the real gulf is between God. I mean, what else can you say? The big vanilla, the ultimate pickle, and me. There has to be the apparent third area that acts as a cushion. Enter religions. A kind of ultimate, at least in the spiritual sense, bureaucracy. Let me do one more. If you can follow this, there is one even better than this. Man and his own genes. Now that's not how ordinary people think about it. Man in the struggle with himself. But I'm just getting a little more specific for you since the tape's running out. Man and his genes, and it produces what? It produces the third area. That is, what seems to be the internal conflict in everybody produces not a union, not a new religion, not some new system of jurisprudence. It produces the place to lay the blame. It's not my fault that I'm in competition, that I'm in a struggle with myself. No. I wouldn't be mad. I wouldn't be here running off my mouth at some stranger at a poor 7-Eleven store making $3. That's my damn wife. She's driving me nuts. Just me worried about my job. Listen, I could be ruining my health drinking as much as I do. You think I like it sometimes? I don't. You know, after years of drinking, I can't say I like it. You don't know. I grew up. They threw me out of an orphanage. It was bad enough I was there, and even the people in the orphanage threw me out. I mean, I can't help it, and I can't afford analysis anymore. That is a form. I was going to let it stay at religion. Can you see that it is the appearance of a third area, and it cushions the higher and the lower? And I'm not going to say which is which here. But it acts as a cushion. It acts as a kind of insulation of one of these from the other. Up here is kind of insulation. Maybe that was easier to start with. And I point out it is not what seems to be the obvious, that everyone would tell you that unions, I mean, it's just ridiculous, right, for me to go any further. Unions for the benefit of labor. As a matter of fact, who belongs to unions? Labor. And it's not. It's to help insulate them from them. It's to help insulate the king, the monarch, from the people. Down here, the idea that there is an out there is a culture, there are external circumstance, which is just as plain to consciousness as it is that unions are for labor. I mean, it's ridiculous for me to say otherwise. Who belongs to unions? Labor. Who votes on contracts? Labor. Who is labor against? Them. So if they're using that, it's obviously for their benefit. Capital would hate labor. Wrong. The people should hate the bureaucracy. The king should hate the bureaucracy. Man apparently in conflict with himself in some way. We've been through, I've talked all kinds of ways to simply, you all know this, everybody on this planet except those who are working for life in a particular way, the real go-getters, everybody else feels incomplete. Everybody else feels like things are not right. Everybody else feels like I should be doing better, whether they're religious, whether they're philosophical, no matter what they are. I'm just putting it right now, since the tape's running out, a little closer. It's man, whoever you are, Fred, Mary, Ethel, Hubert. There's you, whatever you feel you are right now. One of the passing members of some oligarchy or aristocracy, or whether you feel as I am, a monarch. But the monarch has got to have people, or he wouldn't be a monarch. The oligarchy may be more than one person in you that you feel may be in charge, but still is everybody else. So there is this dichotomy in you, in everybody. It's man and his own genetic background. The man being whatever you perceive yourself to be at city level at any given time, ordinarily known as human consciousness. There is a conflict. There is a dichotomy, and one of them needs protection from the other. One of them needs a cushion. One of them needs to be buffered. One of them needs an insulation. And it needs to be something that the one that one of the parties is trying to insulate itself against, the other parties must believe that what's being done is for their benefit. Unions are for the benefit of labor. But they've got to believe that. It's got to appear to be that way. At city level it is that way. Me saying it's not is ridiculous, of course, because in the city it is. I'm not right. Well, of course I'm always right. Others are to blame. It appears to be for the benefit of one of the parties over here on the left-hand side of my arrow. But since I've already pointed out to you that in the glaring case it is obvious that unions are for labor. Only labor belongs to unions. Labor fights management and capital, so it's obvious, and I say it's not. At that level it's exactly the opposite. It's for the benefit of capital. It's to protect the more complex and more powerful from the more powerless. Then down here, what seems to be the obvious? Try and use your great gland, your analogous gland, that if it's wrong and backwards with capital and labor producing unions, then down here, whatever seems to be obvious, man and then his genetic background producing the others are to blame syndrome, all right, whatever seems to be the correct one, hint, 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 hint. Hint, hint, hint. Hint. We're completely out. Well, I didn't tell you, did I? I was going to give a little excursion. Never mind. Bye.